The mysterious arrival. It was a quiet, moonlit night in the small, quiet town nestled at the edge of the forest. The world seemed at peace, wrapped in a blanket of silence. The trees stood tall, their shadows stretching long across the ground as the wind whispered through the leaves. For most people, it was just another peaceful night. But for Max, a loyal German shepherd, something was different. Max had always been a protective dog, alert to everything around him. But tonight, something was off. He sat at the edge of his yard, staring into the dark woods, his ears twitching, eyes scanning the shadows. It wasn't like any other night. He could sense something in the air, something unusual, something unfamiliar. His instincts were on high alert, and his body was tense. He was trained to protect his human. Sam. Max loved Sam deeply. Sam had raised him from a young pup, taking care of him and giving him a safe home. Over the years, their bond had only grown stronger. Sam was more than just a person to Max. He was family. And when something felt wrong, Max knew it was his duty to act. Max growled softly, the sound low but full of urgency. His tail stiffened, and he stood up, moving toward the woods. His senses were telling him something was there. His nose twitched, catching a strange scent in the air. It was faint, but it was there. It didn't smell like anything Max had encountered before. It was different. The further Max ventured into the woods, the stronger the strange scent became. His paws lightly padded over the damp earth, his nose leading him like a compass. The trees grew thicker, and the shadows darker. Max could hear the faint rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl, but there was something else, a soft sound, barely noticeable, like a quiet groan. Max's heart raced. His instincts were sharper than ever, and they told him that the sound was coming from deep within the woods. With his ears perked, he moved faster, ignoring the occasional stick or thorn that scratched at his fur. He had to find out what it was. He had to protect Sam. As he moved deeper, the air grew colder, and the forest seemed quieter. Max's fur bristled as he approached the small clearing, and that's when he saw her. Lying on the ground in the middle of the clearing was a girl. At first glance, she looked like any ordinary person, but something wasn't right. Max's keen eyes immediately noticed the faint glow of her skin, an otherworldly light that seemed to pulse softly with each shallow breath she took. Her hair shimmered like silver, and her eyes were closed, but they were no ordinary human eyes. They were large, glowing faintly with a light that seemed almost unnatural. Max's heart skipped a beat. He stepped closer, sniffing the air around her. The strange scent was stronger now, but it wasn't the scent of any animal he'd encountered before. It was like metal mixed with something sweet, something unearthly. He could feel the weight of her presence in the air, but she didn't seem dangerous, just weak and vulnerable. Max whined softly, nudging her gently with his nose. She didn't respond. The faint glow around her flickered, and her breathing was shallow, almost like she was fading. Max's concern deepened. She was hurt, badly. He could sense it. But what was she doing here? How did she end up in the woods, alone and unconscious? Max took a step back, looking around the clearing. There was no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no sign of a struggle, just her. Whoever she was alone, and she needed help. Max's thoughts immediately turned to Sam. Sam would know what to do. He would help her, just like he had helped Max all those years. Without wasting another second, Max turned around and raced back toward the house. His heart pounded in his chest as he ran through the woods, his paws pounding against the earth. His mind was focused solely on getting Sam, knowing that time was running out for the mysterious girl lying in the woods. As Max ran, his eyes darted back and forth, making sure he was on the right path. The forest was dark, but his instincts guided him like a shining beacon. He had to warn Sam. He had to make sure the girl was safe. He reached the edge of the woods and leaped through the brush, sprinting toward the house. His barks filled the night air, sharp and urgent. Sam, who had been inside his house, quickly glanced out the window. Max's frantic barks were unlike anything he'd ever heard before. Sam knew something was wrong. He quickly grabbed his jacket and ran outside, following the sound of Max's voice. Max was waiting for him at the edge of the yard, panting heavily. He looked at Sam with wide, desperate eyes, as if begging him to follow. Sam didn't hesitate. He knew that when Max acted like this, it meant trouble. Without a word, Sam followed his dog into the woods, trusting him completely. Max led the way, weaving through the trees until they reached the clearing where the alien girl lay. Sam stopped dead in his tracks when he saw her. He had never seen anything like her before. Her pale, glowing skin reflected the moonlight, and the strange symbols on her body seemed to shimmer in the darkness. Sam knelt down beside her, his mind racing. What is this?" he muttered, his heart pounding. But Max stayed close, his gaze never leaving the girl. Sam had no idea what he was dealing with, but he knew one thing for sure: she needed help, and Max had brought him here for a reason. Max's urgency. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting an eerie glow across the clearing. Sam stood frozen, his heart racing as he looked down at the mysterious girl. Her strange, glowing skin seemed almost otherworldly, and for a moment, he couldn't move. He had never seen anything like this before, and a part of him wondered if he was dreaming. Max, however, didn't wait. Max's sharp instincts told him that the girl was in trouble. He barked loudly, breaking Sam's stunned silence. The sound was urgent, almost as if Max was telling him to act, to do something, anything. Sam shook his head, snapping out of his daze. He kneeled beside her, gently touching her skin, which felt unnaturally cold, despite the warm night air. "Is she alive?" Sam muttered to himself, his voice thick with concern. He pressed his fingers to her pulse, and a faint beat answered him. It was weak but steady. Relief flooded through him, but it was short-lived. The girl was barely conscious, and she was clearly in no condition to help herself. Max paced restlessly, his tail low and his ears flicking back and forth, as if trying to communicate with Sam. His dog's behavior was more frantic than Sam had ever seen. Max was intelligent, too intelligent for a dog, but this felt different. It was as if he knew something Sam didn't. Max was more than just a pet. He was Sam's protector, his companion through thick and thin. And Sam could sense that whatever was happening now, Max understood its gravity. "Okay, buddy, I hear you," Sam said softly, trying to reassure Max as he carefully lifted the girl into his arms. Her body felt light, but her skin was shockingly cold, like she wasn't from Earth at all. Sam's thoughts raced as he looked down at her alien features. There was no mistaking it. She wasn't human. The markings on her skin were strange symbols that seemed to shift as if they were alive, and her eyes, though closed, had an unnatural glow that Sam could barely make out. Max followed closely behind, never once straying from Sam's side. As Sam carried the girl back toward the house, Max kept his head turned toward the woods, as though expecting something to emerge from the shadows. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching them. But Max didn't seem afraid. If anything, Max was on high alert, as if ready to defend his human and the mysterious girl at all costs. As they approached the back door of the house, Sam noticed Max's hackles were raised. His dog was rarely this tense. Max had always been protective, but this was different, more intense. Sam pushed the door open, his mind still swirling with questions. Who was this girl? Where had she come from? Why had Max led him here in the first place? Sam rushed to the living room, laying the girl gently on the couch. He quickly grabbed a blanket and covered her, trying to warm her as best as he could. Max, ever watchful, sat at her feet, his eyes locked onto her as if refusing to leave her side. Sam took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair, trying to gather his thoughts. "Okay," Sam said to himself, his voice steady but unsure. "I need to figure this out." He turned to Max. "You're acting like you know her. What's going on, boy?" Max didn't respond in words, of course, but his gaze softened as if to say, "She's important. She's in danger." Sam had no idea how to make sense of it all, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't do this alone. He pulled out his phone and dialed the only person he could think of who might help, a friend who had worked in strange and unexplainable phenomena for years. But as he waited for the call to connect, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that time was running out. Max was still by the girl's side, his eyes locked on her face, and Sam could sense that the dog wasn't just worried. He was waiting. But for what? And why did he feel so certain that this girl's life was so closely tied to their own survival? The phone call went unanswered, and Sam's frustration grew. He had no idea who this girl was, where she came from, or what her purpose was, but something told him that her arrival was no accident. Max's behavior, his urgency, and his unwavering loyalty. There was something deeper to it all. Sam had no choice but to trust his dog. He sat down beside the girl, running a hand over his face. Her breathing had slowed, and her glowing skin was beginning to fade back to a more natural hue, though still far from normal. But as Sam looked at her, he felt a flicker of hope. She was alive. She could survive this. Max suddenly stood up, alert. He barked once, sharply, and Sam stood up in response. His heart skipped a beat. What was it? The hairs on the back of Sam's neck stood on end as he turned toward the window. There, in the distance, something moved in the shadows of the trees. Something large. Sam's grip tightened around his phone. Max's tail flicked once, then he walked over to the window, standing still beside Sam, as if waiting for a signal. Sam squinted into the darkness, but he couldn't make anything out. The feeling of being watched was undeniable now. A cold shiver ran down Sam's spine, and he glanced at Max. The dog's calm expression said everything Sam needed to know. "We're not alone." A girl from the stars. Sam sat on the couch, his mind racing as he glanced back and forth between Max and the alien girl lying unconscious before him. The room felt unnervingly still, the quiet broken only by the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Max sat faithfully by her side, his eyes never leaving her face. It was as though he was waiting for something, as though the fate of this mysterious girl was tied to his own in some unfathomable way. Sam couldn't understand it, but one thing was clear. Something extraordinary had happened, and it was unfolding right in front of him. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration, pacing the small living room. The girl's injuries didn't seem life-threatening, but they were serious enough to make Sam worry. She was pale, far too pale for someone who was supposed to be human. The glowing markings on her skin pulsed gently, fading in and out like a distant heartbeat, as though her very being was connected to something far beyond this world. Sam felt a chill in the air every time he looked at her. She wasn't of this earth. That much was certain. Sam glanced down at Max. His dog had never been wrong before. Max was as loyal as they came, and if he had led Sam to this girl, there had to be a reason. But what? Why was she here? And why was Max so insistent on saving her? A soft groan broke the silence. Sam's heart leaped as the alien girl's eyes fluttered open. Her pupils were large, dark, and reflective, like black mirrors that seemed to absorb the light around them. She blinked a few times, her gaze searching the room with a mix of confusion and fear. Sam froze, unsure of what to do. His mind raced, but no words came to him. What did he say to someone like her? She slowly shifted her head, her gaze falling on Max. The dog's tail wagged slowly, his eyes full of calm reassurance, as if saying, "It's okay, you're safe here." The girl blinked again, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak. But her voice, when it came, was soft, barely a whisper. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice foreign yet beautiful, like a melody Sam had never heard before. Sam knelt down beside her, his voice gentle. "You're safe. You're at my house. My name's Sam, and this is Max." He pointed to the dog, whose tail wagged a little faster at the mention of his name. "What happened to you?" How did you get here?" The girl's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, she looked terrified. She tried to sit up but winced, her body stiff and weak. Sam quickly reached out to steady her, but she recoiled from his touch, her fear evident. Sam withdrew his hand, not wanting to frighten her further. I don't remember," she said, her voice trembling. "I was on a ship. It was attacked. The others." Her voice broke, and she fell silent, her eyes flicking toward the window, her gaze distant, as if she could still see the stars outside. "I'm alone." Max, sensing her pain, padded closer to her and nudged her hand gently. The girl looked down at him, her expression softening for a moment as she met his eyes. Something passed between them, a connection, a mutual understanding. She slowly reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed Max's fur. The dog's eyes glistened with a quiet empathy, as though he understood her pain better than anyone else could. "I'm sorry," the girl whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I don't belong here." Sam watched the interaction closely, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He had never been one to believe in aliens or the far-off worlds that others talked about in whispers. But now, here she was, a living, breathing being from beyond the stars. And she had a story to tell, one that would change everything Sam thought he knew about the universe. "You're not alone anymore," Sam said, his voice quiet but firm. "You're safe here. You're not from around here, are you?" The girl's eyes met his, and she nodded slowly, as if the weight of her past was too much to carry alone. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts before speaking again. "I'm not from Earth," she said. "My name is Lyra. I'm from a planet far away, beyond the reaches of your galaxy. My people, we've been at war with others. It's why I was on the ship." Her voice grew faint as she spoke, as though reliving a painful memory. "We were trying to warn your world, to help, but we weren't fast enough. Our enemies found us. They attacked. My crew. They're all gone now." Sam felt a chill run down his spine as he processed her words. An alien girl from a planet light years away was here on Earth, and she had survived a deadly attack. Sam couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with fear. Who was she running from? And why? "How did you end up here?" Sam asked, trying to piece together the puzzle. Lyra's eyes closed for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "I was the last to escape, in a pod. But it malfunctioned, and I crashed here, on your world. I don't know where I am, only that I am grateful." Her words struck Sam deeply. Here she was, a survivor of a galactic war, stranded on a strange planet, and still, she was expressing gratitude. Sam's heart softened. He knew that no matter how strange or impossible this situation seemed, one thing was certain. Lyra was in need of help, and somehow, he was the one who had to provide it. "We'll figure this out," Sam said quietly, more to himself than to her. "I don't know how, but we will. You're not alone anymore." Max sat at Lyra's feet, his body still, but his eyes focused, as though he understood the gravity of the situation more than anyone else in the room. Sam looked down at the dog, and for a moment, it felt as though Max was silently reassuring him. "You made the right choice." And in that moment, Sam knew that his life, and the life of this alien girl, would never be the same again. The unexpected gift. Sam sat in the dim light of the living room, his gaze fixed on the alien girl, Lyra, as she lay on the couch. Max had positioned himself right beside her, his watchful eyes never leaving her. The atmosphere in the room was thick with a mix of confusion and awe. Sam's mind raced with the questions that plagued him. Who was this girl? What exactly had happened to her? And why had she come to Earth in the first place? The more he thought about it, the clearer it became that their world was not as isolated as he had always believed. The universe was vast and filled with mysteries, and now he had a front-row seat to one of its most extraordinary secrets. Lyra had seemed exhausted when she first woke up, weak and unable to speak much. But now, after a few hours of rest, she was regaining some of her strength. She sat up slowly, her body still trembling slightly from the strain. But her eyes were focused. She was starting to look more alert, as if the haze of whatever had happened to her was starting to lift. Sam offered her a cup of water, which she took gratefully, her hands shaking slightly as she held it. Her glowing skin, though no longer as bright as it had been when she first arrived, still held a faint ethereal shine. It was hard to believe that this girl, this being, was not of this world. She didn't look like anything Sam had ever seen before, and the fact that she was here, alive, breathing, was enough to send his thoughts spiraling. As she drank the water, Sam hesitated, trying to find the right words to say. He wanted to ask more about her people, about where she was from, and the war she had spoken of, but part of him didn't want to push too hard. Lyra had already been through so much, and she didn't need to be overwhelmed. "You're looking a little better," Sam said, trying to break the silence. "How are you feeling?" Lyra placed the empty cup on the coffee table and took a deep breath. "I feel better. Thank you for helping me." Her voice was soft but steady now, each word deliberate, as though she was choosing her words carefully. She glanced at Max, who was now lying down at her feet, his head resting on her lap. "I don't deserve your kindness, but I am grateful." Sam shook his head, feeling a rush of empathy. "You don't need to thank me. You're here now. You're safe." Lyra's gaze shifted to the window, her eyes distant as though seeing something far beyond the walls of the house. "I don't know how long I can stay here. The others, the ones who attacked my ship, they will come looking for me. I don't know if they know I survived, but if they do." Her voice trailed off, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Sam could sense the fear behind her calm demeanor. It wasn't just about being alone on a strange planet. It was the terror of being hunted by those who had destroyed her people. Sam's chest tightened as he realized the depth of the danger she was in. He had no idea what kind of enemies she was facing, but if they were anything like the stories he had heard of alien invaders, the situation was far more dire than he could imagine. Max suddenly stood, his ears pricked up. Sam looked over at the dog, who seemed to be alert to something that Sam couldn't sense. The tension in the air was palpable, and Sam couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. It was like something was about to change. "Max?" Sam asked, his voice cautious. The dog didn't respond, but his behavior seemed to communicate something important. He paced toward the door, turning back to look at Sam as if urging him to follow. Sam got up slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Was something happening outside? He glanced at Lyra, whose expression had grown tense as well. "I think Max senses something," Sam said, his voice low but filled with concern. "Stay here, okay? I'll check it out." Lyra nodded, but Sam could see the worry in her eyes. She was afraid, not just for herself, but for them both. He turned to Max, who was already by the door, eyes fixed on the darkness outside. Max's ears were perked, and his tail was still, betraying none of the usual calm that Sam was accustomed to. It was as if the dog sensed a presence, something out there, moving in the shadows. Sam reached for his jacket and slipped it on, his hand trembling slightly as he grabbed a flashlight from the drawer by the door. The house was quiet, save for the sound of his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. The uncertainty that had been building inside him ever since he found Lyra now felt like a tangible weight, pulling him down. "Stay close, buddy," Sam muttered to Max, who stood by the door, now growling softly under his breath. Sam stepped outside, the cool night air immediately greeting him. The trees surrounding the house were thick with darkness, the wind whispering through the leaves in a haunting chorus. Max led the way, his nose to the ground, moving with purpose. Sam followed, his flashlight cutting through the shadows as he scanned the area. They didn't walk far before Sam saw it. A faint glow in the distance. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a natural light. It shimmered like the light from Lyra's skin, faint but unmistakable. The hairs on the back of Sam's neck stood on end. He gripped the flashlight tighter, feeling the weight of the situation suddenly come crashing down on him. This was no coincidence. Whatever had happened to Lyra, it was far from over. Max's low growl pulled him from his thoughts. The dog's body was tense, his muscles coiled as if he were ready to spring into action. Sam knelt beside him, trying to make out what was ahead. The glow grew brighter, and then in the distance, Sam saw something moving. At first, it was just a silhouette, human-shaped but larger, more unnatural. The light around it pulsed like a heartbeat. Sam's breath hitched in his throat. He had to make a decision. It was clear that whatever this was, it wasn't friendly. But then Max did something unexpected. He stepped forward, barking loudly, but there was no fear in the dog's voice, only a deep, guttural warning. Suddenly, the figure stopped. The glow intensified, and Sam could see a shape now. A being, similar to Lyra, but much taller and more intimidating. Its skin was dark, almost black, and its eyes glowed with a fierce, otherworldly light. It wasn't just one being either. Sam could now see the outline of several more figures behind it, their shapes indistinct in the darkness, but the movement and the unnatural light were unmistakable. They were coming toward him. His heart raced. "No, no, no," Sam whispered under his breath, backing away slowly, his mind reeling. Max growled once more and took a step forward, clearly not backing down. Sam grabbed the dog's collar, pulling him back, feeling the surge of protectiveness. He needed to get back to the house, to Lyra, before it was too late. But the figures didn't seem to be chasing them. They were just watching, standing still in the shadows. Then a voice, low and commanding, spoke from the distance. "You have no idea what you've brought into this world," it said. Its tone was chilling, a voice that seemed to vibrate in Sam's bones. Max growled louder, the sound deepening into a warning, but Sam knew they had no chance of facing these creatures alone. The being spoke again, but this time, it was different. Its voice was not only audible, but also inside Sam's mind. It was telepathic. "Run. It will be your only choice," the voice urged. The hairs on the back of Sam's neck prickled. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing Max's collar tighter, Sam turned and sprinted back to the house, heart pounding, fear gnawing at his chest. Max followed immediately, bounding ahead with the speed and grace that Sam could only admire. The figures didn't follow, but Sam knew they wouldn't need to. The real danger wasn't out here. It was inside. They reached the door, and Sam pushed it open, rushing inside. He slammed it shut behind them, gasping for air. He locked the door with shaking hands, his eyes darting toward Lyra, who was now standing at the edge of the living room. Her expression was unreadable, but the worry in her eyes said everything. "They're here, aren't they?" she asked, her voice low but filled with dread. Sam nodded, his chest tight with fear. "They know you're here, and they're not going to stop." Max padded over to Lyra's side, sitting down and looking up at her with an unwavering loyalty. The tension in the room was palpable. Lyra's eyes were wide now, her gaze flicking between Sam and the door, as if expecting something to burst through any second. "I didn't want to bring danger to your world," Lyra whispered, her voice thick with guilt. "I never meant for this to happen." Sam approached her slowly, his hands trembling. "We'll figure this out. I won't let anything happen to you." He turned to Max, whose eyes locked with his. Sam felt the weight of the moment. He had to protect her, and somehow, he knew Max was going to play a much bigger role in what was coming than either of them could have ever imagined. A shocking revelation. The door of the house was bolted shut, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be enough. His mind raced as he paced across the room, the weight of the situation pressing down on him with every passing second. Lyra stood near the window, her gaze distant, as though she could sense the danger even from a distance. Max was by her side, his posture tense, his ears perked, and his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. The dog's unshakable loyalty was a comfort, but Sam knew that Max couldn't protect them forever. Sam's thoughts were interrupted by Lyra's voice, soft yet filled with an intensity that made him freeze in his tracks. "They're here, aren't they?" she asked, her words not just a question but a statement, as though she had already known the answer. Her tone was filled with a quiet desperation, but beneath it was a strange calmness. She wasn't panicking. Instead, she seemed to be waiting, as if she expected this confrontation. Sam wasn't sure whether that made him more uneasy or more hopeful. He turned to her, his voice steady but laced with concern. "How do you know they're here? Are they tracking you?" His mind was trying to make sense of everything that had happened. How had the figures found them so quickly? What did they want with Lyra? And why was she so composed when her enemies were already so close? Lyra sighed, her eyes never leaving the window. "I can feel them. They've been hunting me for weeks. They have technology that allows them to track my energy signature. My people, my species, are naturally connected to the stars, and our energy fields are unique. Wherever I go, they can sense me." Sam felt a chill creep up his spine as he listened. He had thought he was prepared for anything after meeting Lyra, but this was something far beyond anything he had ever imagined. To think that the universe was full of such advanced technology, and now it was here, on Earth, hunting someone he cared about. His instincts told him to protect her at all costs, but how? What could he do to stop beings from another world? Max seemed to sense the tension in Sam, his ears drooping slightly, as if he too understood the gravity of the situation. Lyra turned to face Sam, her expression serious, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, a glimmer of hope, perhaps, or something more. "Sam," she said quietly, "there's more I need to tell you. The ones hunting me, they're not just any kind of enemy. They're called the Vicarians. They are a ruthless, powerful species, and their sole purpose is to conquer and destroy anything in their path. My people, the Altherians, have been fighting them for centuries, but we've been losing. They are stronger, faster, and their technology is far more advanced than ours." Sam's heart sank as he listened to her recount the story of her people's struggle. It was one thing to hear about alien invasions in movies or books, but to hear it from someone who had lived it, someone who had seen her people fall to this unstoppable force, was something Sam couldn't easily comprehend. "But you said you were a scout. You weren't part of the fighting," Sam said, trying to make sense of her role in this cosmic battle. "Why were you here? What were you trying to do?" Lyra took a deep breath, her expression clouded with both sorrow and determination. She turned away from Sam, looking toward the stars outside the window. "I wasn't just a scout. I was sent on a mission to warn other civilizations. The Vicarians are moving beyond our home planet. They're trying to expand their reach, and they've set their sights on Earth. I've been trying to find a way to stop them from coming here, but when my ship was attacked, I barely escaped with my life." Sam felt a wave of guilt wash over him as Lyra spoke. She hadn't just crash-landed on Earth by accident. She had been trying to prevent something far greater, a galactic war that could threaten the very existence of humanity. He had brought her into his home, not knowing that she carried with her not just an alien being, but a piece of a far-reaching conflict. "You said you were trying to warn us. But why Earth?" Sam asked. "Why come here of all places?" Lyra's eyes flicked to Sam, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope in her gaze. "Because your species, humans, are unlike anything we've ever encountered. You have the ability to adapt, to think outside the box. The Vicarians don't understand you, and that's why they fear you. They underestimate your strength, your resilience. If humanity unites, you might have a chance against them. But you need to know the truth before it's too late. You need to understand what you're up against." Sam felt the weight of her words settle heavily in his chest. This wasn't just about protecting one alien girl. It was about protecting humanity itself. The stakes were much higher than he had ever imagined. He looked at Lyra, his thoughts swirling with the implications of everything she had just told him. But before Sam could respond, Max suddenly jumped up from his spot by the door, his body tense. The dog's growl was deep and guttural, a clear warning that something was wrong. Sam's heart raced as he turned toward the window. Outside, the glow that had haunted him earlier was back, brighter this time, pulsing with an eerie intensity. "They found us," Lyra said softly, her voice filled with resignation. "They'll stop at nothing to capture me, and with me, their path to Earth will be unstoppable." Sam swallowed hard. He didn't know what to do, but the reality of the situation was undeniable. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the future of the planet. Max stood firmly at Lyra's side, a silent guardian, his instincts razor-sharp as ever. Sam realized that he couldn't do this alone. He had to protect her, protect humanity, and somehow stop the Vicarians from reaching Earth. The door rattled suddenly, snapping Sam out of his thoughts. The Vicarians were here, and they were ready to make their move. The aliens' gratitude. The door rattled again, more forcefully this time, and Sam's heart raced in response. The Vicarians were right outside, the threat palpable in the air. Every fiber of Sam's being screamed at him to protect Lyra, to keep her safe, but he knew the odds were against them. No matter how many locks or bolted doors stood between them, the Vicarians had the technology to break through. They had to move quickly, or everything would be lost. But before Sam could even consider what their next move should be, Lyra stepped forward. Her voice was calm, despite the fear that was unmistakable in her eyes. There was a quiet strength in her that Sam couldn't deny. He had seen it before, when she had first regained consciousness, when she had spoken of her people, her past, and the war that had torn them apart. But now, she was about to reveal something far deeper, something that could change everything. "You don't have to do this alone," Lyra said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "There's a way to stop them, to fight back. But you need to trust me." Sam glanced at her, unsure of what she meant. Trust her. He had only just met her. She was an alien, and everything about her life was a mystery. Yet there was a strange connection between them, something that he couldn't explain. Max, too, seemed to be more than just a guard dog. His eyes were locked on Lyra, as though he had already made up his mind. "What do you mean?" Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper, knowing the Vicarians could be moments away from breaking through. "How can we stop them? I don't have the first clue about alien technology or intergalactic warfare." Lyra smiled softly, though her eyes betrayed the gravity of the situation. "You don't need to know everything, Sam. You just need to believe in yourself. Believe in your species. Humans have something the Vicarians don't. Resilience. You fight not just for survival, but because you want to protect those you care about. You don't give up, and that's why they fear you." Sam wasn't sure if he understood everything she was saying, but the conviction in her voice was enough to keep him from dismissing it. He had always believed that humanity's strength came from their will to fight, to protect one another, but hearing it from Lyra gave it an entirely new meaning. The idea that the Vicarians underestimated them, that they didn't see humans as a true threat, seemed like a strange kind of hope. Perhaps that was the advantage they needed. But how could they fight back? What did Lyra mean by trusting her? As though reading his mind, Lyra took a step closer to Sam, her eyes never leaving his. "There is technology I can share with you, but it's dangerous. It's not just a weapon. It's a way of thinking, a way of adapting to new threats. It's the key to defeating the Vicarians, but I can only teach you what I know. I can't do it for you." Max stood beside Lyra, his eyes unwavering, as though he too was part of this strange, unspoken bond. The dog's presence was comforting, but Sam knew it wasn't enough to protect them from what was coming. Lyra was the key. She was the one who had the knowledge, the understanding, and the power to help them. Lyra's hands trembled slightly as she reached out, her fingers brushing against the sides of her glowing skin. This is not something that can be learned quickly. The Vicarians control technology that bends reality. that manipulates energy. But our technology, it's different. It's based on the stars, on the very forces that govern the universe. We call it the flow. It's an energy, a connection between all living things. Sam's confusion must have been obvious, because Lyra paused, her gaze softening. She took a deep breath, as if preparing herself to explain something incredibly difficult. Think of it like this. Everything in the universe is connected. Every atom, every particle, has its place. The Vicarians don't see it this way. They seek to control everything, to dominate it. But the flow allows us to understand that connection, to harness it in ways they can't. Sam could feel his mind whirling, trying to grasp the concept she was presenting. It was almost too much to take in, too far beyond anything he had ever imagined. But there was something in Lyra's eyes, something that made him trust her, despite the impossibility of the situation. She was offering him a lifeline, a way to fight back. How do we use this? Flow? Sam asked, his voice low. How do we fight back? Lyra's gaze met his, steady and filled with an urgency Sam had never seen before. I can teach you, but it will take time. The Vicarians are not far behind. They'll be here soon, and when they arrive, they'll bring with them a power unlike anything you've ever faced. But together, we can stop them. Max, ever the sentinel, let out a low growl, as if echoing the seriousness of the moment. The room was thick with tension, but in the midst of it all, there was a sense of purpose, a quiet understanding that this was the turning point. They couldn't run anymore. They couldn't hide. The time had come to take a stand. Sam nodded slowly, a mix of fear and determination swirling within him. What do we need to do? He asked, his voice firm, though the weight of the responsibility hung heavily on his shoulders. Lyra smiled again, her expression soft, but resolute. First, you need to believe that you can. Your mind is the greatest weapon you have. You must open yourself to the flow. Only then can you start to understand how to harness it. Sam didn't know how he would do it, but he knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took. For Lyra, for humanity, and for the chance to fight back against the Vicarians. As the sound of the Vicarian forces approaching grew louder, Sam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that was happening. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a battle for the future of the planet. And Sam would not let the Vicarians win. A new beginning. The Vicarians were at the doorstep. Sam could feel it in his bones. The storm was coming. The air in the house felt thicker, almost oppressive, as though the walls themselves were aware of the impending danger. The house, once a place of safety and familiarity, now seemed like a fragile shell, barely holding back the forces that threatened to tear it apart. Sam stood in the living room, his eyes fixed on Lyra, who was standing by the window, looking outward with an intensity that matched his own growing dread. Max was beside her, his ears perked up, his body coiled like a spring, ready to protect. It was as if the dog could sense the monumental shift in the atmosphere, just as Sam could. The bond between Lyra and Max had grown stronger over the past hours. The two of them, this strange alien girl and a loyal dog, had formed a connection that Sam couldn't entirely explain, but he had learned to trust it. Max had always been more than just a pet. He was an integral part of their fight now, his instincts sharper than ever. The countdown was ticking. Sam knew they had only moments to act. The Vicarians were closing in fast, and if they didn't make a move, they would be surrounded with nowhere to run. Sam turned to Lyra, his heart pounding in his chest. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low but filled with determination. Lyra turned to him, her expression a mix of fear and resolve. She had been quiet for a few moments, the weight of everything finally settling on her shoulders. Sam could see the conflict in her eyes. She had never expected her mission to end this way. She had hoped for more time, for more answers, but there was no more time to waste. They had to act, and they had to act now. "I am," she replied, her voice steady, but carrying an underlying urgency. But this won't be easy, Sam. The Vicarians are relentless. If we're going to stop them, we need to be quick, and we need to think like them. They don't see humans as a threat, but they will soon. You have to trust in the flow. You have to learn it, and you have to trust your instincts. Sam nodded, taking a deep breath. He had never felt more out of his depth. He wasn't a soldier, nor a strategist. He was just a regular guy, a guy who had been thrown into something far bigger than himself. But as he looked at Lyra, standing there with that quiet, unshakable strength, and then at Max, standing by her side with a protective stance, something inside him clicked. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about fighting for what mattered most, for Earth, for their future, and for the people they loved. He closed his eyes for a moment, blocking out the noise of his racing thoughts. He had to focus. The flow. He had no idea how to tap into it, but Lyra had given him the key. It was a concept of connection, of energy that flowed through everything. It was about understanding the fabric of reality itself, something Sam knew he had to grasp quickly if they were to stand a chance. Taking a deep breath, Sam let his mind quiet. He felt his heartbeat, slow and steady, grounding him. The world outside seemed to fade away as he focused on the now. He imagined the energy of the universe, like an invisible web that connected everything around him. He could feel it, just beyond his reach, like a faint pulse in the air, the same way Max could sense things before they happened. Lyra had taught him that everything had a purpose, a place in the grand scheme of the universe, and that understanding was the key to unlocking the flow. Lyra stepped closer to Sam, her eyes meeting his. There was no time for hesitation now. "You have to trust it," she whispered. "Focus on the connection. Feel it. It's inside you, just waiting to be awakened." Sam closed his eyes again, pushing aside all doubts. He reached out mentally, trying to feel the energy, the connection between everything around him. It was faint at first, like a whisper in the wind, but then it grew clearer. He could sense it in the walls, the ground beneath his feet, and even in the air. It was the world itself, alive with energy. And with that realization, a surge of power coursed through him, sharp and intense, filling him with strength he didn't know he had. It wasn't just about fighting back. It was about becoming one with the world around him. It was about understanding that energy, using it, guiding it. Sam didn't need to control it. He just needed to let it flow. Suddenly, a sharp metallic sound cut through the air, an unmistakable warning that the Vicarians had arrived. Max growled low, his hackles raised. Sam turned to the door, where the faint hum of alien technology was vibrating through the walls. The Vicarians were here, but they weren't just coming for Lyra. They were coming for everything. Lyra stepped back from Sam, her expression focused, her body moving with purpose. She stood beside Max, her hands raised slightly, as though preparing for something. She looked at Sam one last time. "Now is the time," she said, her voice steady. "Together, we fight." The door shook again, more violently this time, the unmistakable sound of alien weapons charging up. But Sam wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't just standing there waiting to be attacked. He felt the energy of the flow surge within him. He could feel the pulse of the universe, and he could feel his connection to Lyra, to Max, to everything. As the Vicarians breached the door, Sam stepped forward, his hands raised, palms open. The energy within him responded, flowing through his body like lightning, connecting with the air around him. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he could sense it. He was part of something bigger now, something ancient, something powerful. And as he focused, the air around him seemed to crackle with energy. The Vicarians, who had once thought of humanity as a mere obstacle, now faced something they had never encountered before. As they poured through the door, weapons raised, they were met not with the resistance of a human, but with the power of the flow, guided by the will of a man who refused to let his world fall. Max leaped forward, barking fiercely, a blur of motion that distracted the Vicarians for just a moment. It was all Sam needed. In that split second, he focused the energy, sending a shockwave of force toward the invaders. It hit them like a wall, knocking them back, disorienting them. The Vicarians, stunned by the unexpected power, stumbled, confused. But Sam didn't stop. He focused again, gathering the energy within him and directing it outward. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. He had Lyra, he had Max, and for the first time in his life, Sam understood what it meant to fight with the universe itself. The Vicarians were relentless, but so were they. They had underestimated humanity, and now they would learn. Sam and Lyra, joined by Max's unwavering loyalty, had unlocked the power of the flow. Together, they would protect Earth, and they would prove that humanity was more than just a footnote in the grand story of the universe. This was their fight, and they would not lose.